Okay, so I'll start with thanks, firstly, to all of you for coming out on what actually is a really very pleasant evening, though we are in the shade, so I fear it's going to get progressively a bit cooler as the evening goes on. Thanks, first of all, to the playing field. Nigel Clark and I have put out the chairs. All the chairs have been sanitised and appropriately distanced because I'm afraid the coronavirus has not gone away and it's as deadly as ever it was. So that's why we're outside and we're not in the memorial hall. The other people I have to thank are obviously the people who come this evening to present to you. Very unfortunately, David James, who I think many of you know, isn't at all well. And so on medical advice, he hasn't come this evening. Jan, his wife, is here, and his son, Will, who some of you may know, is, I understand, brought up in the village before my time. He's going to lead the presentation, and he'll be supported and with, I think, the detail that we're really looking for by Tom Griffiths of Ashford Homes and Paul Coleman of CMS, who are the designers, the architects for the scheme. This isn't a meeting where we're going to make any sort of decision. No formal application has yet been put in, so there's no decision on which we can make. That will come at, as far as the parish council is concerned, at a future meeting once any application has been submitted and processed by Mendip. I'd like to say that Barbie Lund, our district councillor from Mendip, is here this evening, as is Linda Oliver, our county councillor. I think all our parish councillors are here this evening, and obviously one missing. Okay, I'm told one is missing. Elaine isn't here, is she?
No.
So very briefly, because I think it may be touched on by others, how has this all come about? Clearly through the neighbourhood plan process, we were obliged to talk to all the landowners, and there was an event where 6 schemes were put forward for consideration within the neighbourhood plan. Every one of those schemes was voted against. It has been pointed out that the one with least opposition, at that time at least, was the proposal at Merfield. Because of that reaction, conversations were had with David James and his family, and a proposal to build properties immediately adjacent to Merfield was put forward and was put into the neighbourhood plan. That proposal hasn't been developed any further. Then the process of the Mendip Local Plan Part 2, this was being reviewed, and the inspector, in a decision that Road Parish Council and Beckington and Norton are jointly continuing to fight, and have actually got the inspector to agree to hold further meetings, which is believed to be the first time that's ever happened, where he's put a recommendation forward and has agreed to hold further hearings on his recommendation. But what he did in an interim judgment say to Mendip was that there were going to have to be 506 houses built in northeast Mendip. He actually drew northeast Mendip to specifically exclude Frome, and so the 506 houses are to be in our 3 villages and in Midsummer Norton and Radstock. Baines is up in arms at that, and obviously Road Parish Council is very opposed to that inspector's ruling. The hearings on his ruling will take place in September, and we're going to be represented there. We plan to be represented there. But then Mendip had to find a home for this 506 houses. They were obliged to do that in response to the inspector, and most of those houses are going to go towards the area of Radstock and Midsummer Norton, but Mendip allocated 26 houses to be built in Road, and the site that they have put forward is the site which is described as Merfield, but in reality is probably better described as adjacent to the Mead. So that's why we're here this evening. David James and family have consulted with Ashford Homes, who's a very well-known builder in this area, and also CMS. So I'm now going to hand over to Will. Will is an experienced presenter, but he does admit this is the first time he's actually had to do a presentation on a housing development, so bear with him. Will.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks very much, everyone. As you just say, I'm Will James, son of David and Jan. My dad apologises for the fact that he can't be here tonight. He's not in the best of health, so I'm afraid you're lumbered with me. But I can assure you I have the village's best interests at heart. I grew up here. I moved here with my family when I was 6 years old in 1998, and I've been in and around the village since then. So really, the goal of my talk tonight is to try and talk through our family's motivations in the development, as well as run through the history of the project from our perspective, to try and get everyone on the same page, to understand where we're all coming from. After my talk, I'm going to hand over to Tom Griffiths of Ashford Homes, who will be talking for a couple of minutes, as well as Paul Coleman of CMS Architects. We'll take questions, if that's all right, after the three of us have spoken. So to begin with the history, briefly, in 2014, the parish council approached my family with regard to a development as they were preparing the neighbourhood plan. There were a series of pre-application meetings held with both the parish council, Mendip district, as well as English Heritage. And these were largely around broad principles, so the type of development that would be done, as well as possible locations around the village. The following year, in 2015, it should be emphasised that at this stage my family weren't actually on board with the idea of a housing development adjacent to Merfield House and near the Mead. So instead my family put forward a proposal to the parish council. Many of you may remember it. It was around the idea of building or rather moving the school to a bigger plot of land adjacent to the Mead, or even giving the land away for a small village surgery. In other words, village services was the goal of the proposal. All of those options were rejected by the parish council. Over the course of the following year, my family came round to the idea of putting housing on that piece of land, and engaged the services of CMS Architects on advice of local councillors. In 2017, as you all know, the village published its neighbourhood plan, and I'll just quickly quote one part of it here, which is that there is therefore an identified need in Road for private provision of specialist housing for the elderly and local support for meeting this community need. The plan goes on to describe several options for development around Merfield House and its grounds. So by this stage, to clarify, the family were informed that both the parish council and the village as a whole were supportive of the initiative. Indeed, we'd actually received letters of interest from local residents who were inquiring about the possibility of a plot on the site. So CMS was given a broad brief to explore the potential for retirement and care facilities. Architects laid out a range of possible solutions, from limited development on the land adjacent to Merfield House and the Mead, to care facilities based at Merfield House as part of a larger development site. They then began to test the market for whether there'd been any interest in these. Over the course of the next 2 years, they did so. And in 2019, they concluded there wasn't a market for a large care home facility based around the Merfield house. The reason for that was the distance that road was from Bath. And Paul can talk about this a bit more after I've finished speaking. CMS then focused on what was supposed to be the next piece of land that was seen as preferable, which was this land that we're here to discuss tonight, the land adjacent to Merfield House and the Mead, with a specific focus on housing for the elderly. Now, as Peter's just been saying, at the same time, Mendip's local plan Part 2 was submitted for independent examination. And as he was saying, in late 2019, the inspector concluded that Mendip needed to allocate additional housing if it was to meet its targets. And they looked specifically at the Merfield House Mead plot of land and said that at least 26 units of general housing could be built there. Now, to be clear, this resulted in lots of interest from large-scale developers approaching my family and asking whether or not we would be interested in a development of sorts on there. Now, we didn't think this was appropriate. We turned these offers down because this was to do with general housing and it wasn't in keeping with the discussions we've had with the parish council over the last few years, as well as the neighbourhood plan. So following that and discussions with local councillors, we were advised to open discussions with a developer who was known well to the area and was well respected, Ashford Homes. So this brings us up to the present day, and I think at some point we can talk about the outline submission that they've prepared. And to be clear, at this stage of the process, this is very much it's very much open to ideas. So the point of this meeting really is to generate constructive feedback on what the layout might look like, what sort of housing the village would be interested in. We think we have a good idea based on previous discussions and the neighbourhood plan, but we really welcome input from you all this evening. I now turn to the most important part of my opening remarks, really, which is the role of influence that our family has managed to accrue with the developer. This is the benefit we've found that we found a developer here in Ashford Homes that we have a good relationship with, and we've been able to influence a lot of the early plans that have been put forward in line with the village's wishes. And I want to give you 5 concrete examples of that. So first of all, we're aware that there are concerns over increased traffic coming through, and particularly construction traffic that would come through the village as a result of a new development. We believe that it's possible to avoid this entirely by bringing all construction traffic from the A36 and then using into and out of Straight Lane. Second, concerns have been raised about pedestrians being able to access the centre of the village on foot. We have been discussing this with Ashford Homes, and they have presented to us an idea where there would be a separate footpath for villagers to be able to walk between the new site and the centre of the village without having to be on the road. Third, we're also conscious that there's some opposition from some of the residents of the Mead regarding access. Now, at our request, Ashford Homes has consulted widely at great expense and with a number of independent experts to identify the most suitable options for access, and I think Tom will talk a bit more about that in his remarks or in the Q&A. Turning to point 4, and this is something that wasn't touched upon greatly in the Mendip plan, but the focus of that was more about, from what we see, at least so far, is general housing. And as I said, the key for us really, the motivation of the family, is in line with the village's wishes to provide housing for the elderly. And we think this can be done largely through a number of small bungalows that we'll have in the development. The draft includes several at the moment, but as I said, there is much more scope for increasing this number. We can discuss that this evening. Based on discussions I've been having with Tom, my dad's been having with Tom over the last few days, we believe we have an intention now where we can achieve approximately 50% of the homes in the development that will be for the elderly or affordable housing. Finally, Another key aspect to the neighbourhood plan that Road produced a few years ago is ensuring that local residents would have first priority on any new development, particularly for the homes for the elderly. We believe that the principle of the plan, encouraging younger families to move into the village while elderly residents can downsize, is as vital today as it was in 2017. So we think that it's possible to make provisions to proven elderly residents to have preference in the first instance on the elderly housing developments. This could take the form of a cascade system, for those who are familiar with it, which can be enforceable with Section 106 legal agreements. Essentially, the units that are earmarked as affordable and for elderly residents would only be placed on the market once local residents have had a chance to go in for them and buy them. And we can do that on 3 or 6 months arrangements. And Tom, who's much more familiar with that system, can talk to you about that. Normally, and this is the key point about influence that we have here, this is why it's such a good opportunity to engage through a developer at the moment. Normally, a cascade system would only be applicable for a set of affordable houses, but because of our relationship with Ashford Homes, we've managed to see if we can get something in line for elderly homes, for homes for elderly people as well. To conclude, our goal really here is to make the development a harmonious and attractive addition to the village and to village life. We know that Ashford Homes can reproduce high quality homes that will blend into the road style. So this means we'll strive for real integration, and as I said, with approximately 50% dedicated for elderly housing or affordable housing, with preference going to local people first. Our objective is to set the new standard for developments in the area, with special attention given to integration, blend and style. We hope to make the village very proud of its new addition. I thank you very much, and I look forward to receiving your feedback. Turn to Tom.
Thank you very much, Will, and thank you to the village too for inviting us to attend this specially organised event tonight. It is very much appreciated, particularly in the current climate. For those that don't know Ashford Homes, my name is Tom Griffiths. I'm Development Director. My principal role really is to guide schemes through the planning process, through to detailed design, and hopefully a start on site if we're lucky enough to gain planning consent. We're a local company. We've been based in Melksham and Bradford upon Avon for the last 30 years. Only latterly we moved to our new office on the edge of Bradford. We have grown as a company, but we're still very much, our core focus is on small sites. Some of you might be familiar with Southwinds Farm, just down the road in Wolverton. It was a site that had unfortunately blighted the local area for some time. We were quite fortunate to be able to work with local parish councils. I think Tellisford and Lullington were instrumental. A lot of local support to see that scheme finally come to fruition. I'm pleased to say the scheme was just about finished off last month. We've got some road markings going down on the A36 next week, which will conclude what has been probably a 10-year project for us in the local area on what was a very technically challenging site. We've also got a number of local schemes in the area, generally ranging in size from 2 or 3 plots up to 35 or 40. We're not a big volume developer by any means. This would certainly be one of the larger schemes that we've got on our books at the moment, and generally our core focus is within half an hour to an hour of our office in Bradford upon Avon. As Will said, we're quite late party to these discussions. I know David has been discussing the site with Rod, our chairman, for a number of years, principally in relation to the provision of housing for the elderly via the neighbourhood plan process. As Will said earlier, things moved on to a degree at the tail end of last year with the local plan part 2 and the inspector's recommendation that additional housing was to be provided across Mendip, including North East Mendip and potentially the village of Road. We understand that's not always popular and is not always in step with the neighbourhood planning process, but obviously, pressure on housing and to deliver housing through a system which has unfortunately historically under-delivered over a number of years. So we became involved both with David and his family and CMS at the end of last year, beginning of this year. And I have to say, alluding to what Will said earlier, I don't think we've ever been fortunate enough to work with a landowner and his family that have such a vested interest in the village. And we've worked very closely with them to develop plans for what is purely an outline application at this stage. We understand there are concerns around access, so we're looking at the detail of that at the moment in the run-up to that planning submission. But really, the purpose of tonight is to get people's feedback really as to what they would like to see on the site. We understand there is a need for accommodation for the elderly on the site, and we've been working with Will, as he said, to potentially provide up to 50% of the site to be either affordable or for the elderly, and we're looking at mechanisms by which that can be secured through Section 106 agreement that would be essentially the legal agreement that would go with any planning consent. So there will be a degree of discussions with Mendip through the planning process as to how that could be secured. Again, as Will said earlier, typically the cascade marketing approach, which would essentially be that for the affordable homes, there would be a 3-month period through which only people that have a connection to the parish could acquire those units. That would then typically be opened out to the district after that 3 or 6 month period, and then to anyone who had a connection to the area or who wanted to purchase that property. We're looking at potentially rolling that out for housing for the elderly. But again, those mechanisms need to be explored with the parish council and with Mendip through the planning process. So really, I mean, the floor is open really for question and answers. We have developed an outline application. As I say, we're not too hung up on the layout at present. That will be resolved through a later planning submission, which is probably at least 6 months to a year away, and that's obviously on the back of hopefully what will be a successful outline application through negotiations with the parish council. So I'm happy to answer questions as to motives or the intent for the site, timescales, and anything that is currently concerning the village.
So I have a question. But by inference, the 50% of the properties, would they be conventional market?
Let's see.
So the 50% that aren't for the elderly, or are they conventional market housing?
Yes, that's the intention. I mean, Mendip's planning policy is they are reliant potentially on this site to deliver what they would call as general housing. We are very keen to deliver the required 30% affordable housing, but on top of that, we recognise there's an acute need in villages across Somerset, but particularly in Road, for elderly people to be able to downsize to free up family homes.
And can this meeting influence the 50% of housing that you're designing?
We can certainly take comments on board, as it's a process we have to go through with Mendip District Council. I think they'd be quite happy to see the provision for homes for the elderly, and that's not to preclude any further development or future developments via the neighbourhood plan that might see a more formal care home or something of that ilk come forward for Merfield House and its buildings as currently proposed in the neighbourhood plan. So the two could very much come together and hopefully complement each other as an inclusive community, which is something that we always strive to create.
Thank you.
Right.
My name's Mike Price. I'm a resident of the Mead, and it seems that we're really just talking about how you're going to further develop. From my point of view, my perspective, and I know lots of people in the Mead, we don't want it there. It's on Greenfield side. I'm not sure if your in-depth studies have shown how many people use the straight lane for walking their dogs, taking exercise, etc., and what the congestion is like outside of the schools on pick-up and drop-off. You're going to have increased traffic for your construction traffic. Not only that, you will have people trying to get out of there when it's completed and through the Mead. My understanding is that's where the access point is going to be. And at the moment, you can wait 10 to 15 minutes to get out of the Mead whilst people are dropping off their cars and their children at the overprescribed school. So my question is really, what in-depth studies have you done to say that everything's going to be great and fine, everybody's going to be able to walk and be safe on those roads, and what have you done to look at the traffic and stuff?
Yeah, no, we fully understand that there is a problem at that junction that is existing. We will be preparing a transport statement that will accompany the planning submission. Usually that only applies to larger sites, but we recognise that this site has got access constraints, and that will assess access via the mead, or alternatively an access from straight lane. The ecology reports that have been commissioned are saying really that in order to form an access directly from straight lane, which probably would be to the detriment of the character of what is quite an attractive rural lane, as you know, you would need to take out such a significant portion of the hedgerow and trees that from an ecological point of view that's probably not favoured, and from a highways point of view the visibility isn't as great as it is from the mead. That said, we are proposing improvements to the junction of the mead with High Street to improve that visibility, and also to create an additional public footpath as well.
What did the studies say about the roundabouts? So the two roundabouts that are oversubscribed as far as traffic are, and the Highways Commission are concerned, what provision are you making by putting all that much traffic extra onto those roundabouts? Are you going to improve the roundabouts?
The scale of this development is, whilst it's significant for road, in terms of the impact on the strategic road network and the roundabout on the A36, it will be extremely minimal. And the transport statement will look at that, but the ability for what is quite a small development to upgrade a roundabout is something that's probably, in all honesty, via the transport statement, it will prove that the impact on those roundabouts really isn't
So
that
in your
great.
studies then, did you look at the Highways report to say that those two roundabouts needed improvement and upgrade? And
Yeah.
they were, at the moment, they were too small?
Yeah, we're aware that there's an existing problem there, but as I say, 26 houses is quite a modest scheme, so the additional impact on that is minimal.
Along very small lanes you're going to be travelling. You're going to be putting traffic along very small lanes.
But again, by all accounts, I agree that we don't want to ruin that lovely lane and the natural hedgerows, trees that we have. We also have exactly the same leading into the meads all the way to the fields. So can we rest assured that that hedgerow and that amount of natural beauty will stay in place? It won't be used in any other way for access to the buildings prior to or post build if it happens.
Well, obviously there would be the need to facilitate an access into the site, so there would be some vegetation removal, but we're looking to focus that access to reduce the minimum amount of vegetation, which is why access from straight lane, aside from the highways issue, is not favoured. And we're also looking to reinforce all of the hedgerows, to be honest, because we've got some beautiful boundary hedgerows and mature trees on the site. So all of those would be reinforced, and there'd also almost be a secondary row of planting to screen the site and also create additional habitat for wildlife as well. So yeah, it would certainly be done with the minimum impact possible.
I think the plan was that we would hear from Paul Coleman and then really take questions. So
There's just one more question. Can I just say one thing? I used to drive lorries. I drove tippers and I did concrete. And I'm telling you now, lorry drivers have got no respect, and they will have no respect coming down them lanes.
Yeah, quite right.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but they won't. I drove for the quarries, and I've been to building sites, and I've been down lanes like that, and they don't care.
Yeah.
And I have done it myself, where I've had to go up on the side, and you've left great big wheel marks and taken rough hedges out.
But I think it would be preferable to come via straight lane rather than through the village.
It'll get ruined. I'm telling you now, everybody here, it will absolutely be wrecked.
And why should our piece of lane have to have the access? If there's going to be any access, it should go out on a straight lane. You've no idea what that lane is like for traffic. It's all been viewed with this lockdown and everyone quiet and some not at work, etc. You have no idea what that lane is like. Should that?
I think that's what key. We know access is quite an emotive topic, and that's why we're very keen to flush that out early in the planning process. That's why we're seeking approval.
I hope it would be priority.
Well, absolutely. So we are seeking approval of the access design as part of what is an outline application, and that's where. So the application will be submitted to Mendip, and Somerset County Council and their highways team will have the ability to input into the design process and essentially tell us what's the safest way.
If they take as much notice as they did with the plan church, we don't stand a chance because they just go ahead with it.
So, Tom, I would also say I was out with my dog when the survey team came to survey the mead. There may be other surveys that have happened, but they did it at the beginning of lockdown. So I live right on the corner of the mead, right on that junction, and it is horrendous. I get my drive parked across. There are children running across the road. There is no access in and out of that junction. Sometimes the bus gets stuck down the road and everyone has to reverse out. To me, it's totally implausible that you are thinking about putting an access to somewhere else, or even considering construction traffic coming through there.
There's just no room, is there?
No, it's really dangerous.
Unless you're going to knock some houses down.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that will come in. There's something called a Section 278 agreement, which is essentially off-site highway works that are viewed as essential to make sure that a development has the minimal impact on the surrounding area, and that's why we're putting forward as part of the outline application the proposal to improve that junction and to increase pedestrian
I
facilities.
don't think that will make any difference. You can't improve that junction if the road itself is not wide enough.
It's just not enough room. When a chap had an accident,
give us
the ambulance couldn't get
Lorries coming out of the quarry.
Peter,
I'm telling you
might be
now, there'll be a
worth asking
conflict.
Linda as well,
One after another.
from Highways.
You get held up on site, the other lorry turns up, you're going to have about 5 or 6 lorries sat there waiting to hit.
You just
So-
don't want it there, that's the problem, but you don't want it there.
I understand all these issues, and we will come back to them, but Paul Coleman is actually going to give us, I believe, details of the design or the proposed design of the site, and I think that's an important thing for us to see, and then after that we'll take questions.
Chair, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Actually, there's been one of the problems with having the same name as your colleagues in the office. My colleague down here is actually the chartered architect. His name is Paul Rogers, and he will be talking to you about that in a wee while. I was actually asked to come along here this evening to put a little bit of history, because when I was first introduced to David some considerable time ago now, the intention was focused on care. Now, whether that was care homes, care village, or however you wish to phrase it. And I have to say that when I first started looking at this from a design and compliance point of view, that seemed a very logical approach for us to take. And we spent in excess of 2 years looking at a number of different layouts and schemes, which were modelled from a fairly modest sort of density and layout to something that was quite significant. Obviously, the market always dictates whether there is a demand for developments of that type. And we spent some considerable time talking to a number of key operators and local operators, including, let's say, the Order of St John based in Bath, because we were convinced that being so close to Bath here, that would be well received. But all of the operators, including the Order of St John, felt that the site was too remote, too far away from Bath for it to be suitable for a care home or care village. And we were quite surprised by that, but the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but we were unable to generate any meaningful interest in that, which is, as Will explained a short while ago, is how we came away from care into residential. The key drive behind the residential has always been a legacy of providing something that would be suitable and beneficial to the village by way of an increased percentage for elderly rather than pure care. One of the problems we find in a lot of villages is there's nowhere for people to relocate to. They don't want to move from the village. They want to stay with their friends, but they have a house which perhaps by that time is too big, is difficult for them to manage, and they very much want to stay in the local vicinity. And I think this is what this proposal in outline will seek to do. That really, Chair, is. I just wanted to add a little bit of backbone, if you like, to the issue of the care side of things and why that hasn't been promoted, despite it being initially the favoured route. And Tom and Paul and Will, for that matter, can explain more about the current thinking of the scheme. So that was really what I was keen to try and do. So thank you very much, and appreciate you coming up, because this engagement is really important. I know you look at us and think, oh, here they go, another developer, they'll just railroad it through. That's not the way that we as a practice work. We have always spent more time than most in engaging with communities to make certain we get the best out of it. And that generally is what we're aiming to do here today. We have no fixed agendas in the true sense of the word. We're looking to engage with you. So hopefully you'll give my colleagues some positive feedback or comments that we can actually make sure get incorporated and taken forward. So thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you. Can I also say, it's just by chance that several of us found out about this evening's meeting. So where in future, if we find out about a meeting, if it weren't like several passionate neighbours, let me know, and I know that a couple of other people know. Sorry to
That's
get there, but it just seemed the right time to ask.
It's obviously very difficult at the moment with all the restrictions on public meetings. I have circulated news about this meeting to those people who had written to the parish council expressing concerns about this site, and I then invited them to let me know if there was anybody else who should come to this meeting. So we have reached out to try and enable as many people who have got concerns to come to the meeting, and I think it's fair to say that most of the people here are those who have voiced the concerns, because that's what we want the Will and the family and Ashford Homes and CMS to hear, and I think they are hearing that. So I think we have tried very hard to reach the people who have got those concerns. We will report on this meeting on the village Facebook, on link in the link, and if a planning application is put to the parish council, then that will be on the agenda. It will be published, and we'll have to decide the best way of actually meeting to consider that. Might be a Zoom meeting that would allow everyone who wanted, who've got the technology, and that's why we haven't had this meeting on Zoom, because a number of people said they couldn't access the platform. So we said we can't hold it in the Memorial Hall, so we would do it outside, but there is a limit to the number of people who can hold it outside. We recognise that we need to consult, and that particularly the people on the Mead need to feel that they've been consulted, and people in Townsend as well. So I think we've done our utmost, and I'm working with a number of people who I know are opposed to the scheme, making sure that they're kept informed as to what's happening.
Peter, are you going to be looking at other sites within the village, or is this an absolute done deal?
It's not a done deal, but it is on the Mendip plan, and their response to the inspector's report. I think we all know that there's another scheme being floated at the moment, which is known as Barbara's-Field. There is every possibility that the village might have both schemes. It's not a choice between one scheme, not necessarily a choice between one scheme or another. It's possibly that we could end up with both schemes, because Mendip doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. Therefore, our protections against excessive, what we might deem as excessive development within our village, are nothing like as strong as they were, because it's judged by NPPF rules and not by local plan rules, which, as those of you who were around with the Church Farm development, it was going to be turned down under local plan rules. The council lost its 5-year housing supply. It was then judged by NPPF rules, and it was approved, and that was in the space of a month, the change in approach. So it's not that necessarily it's a development at Merfield or it's a development at Barbara's-Field. It could be both. But at the moment, clearly the concern for those who are opposed to the development adjacent to the Mead, the concern has to be that this is currently a proposal from Mendip that this site be their response, part of their response to the inspector's interim report. And believe me, there is very strong opposition in Norton and in Beckington to similar proposals. Barbie.
I think it is important to say, though, as you mentioned at the beginning, Peter, that there are additional hearings for the inspector's report, and if those 505 houses weren't allocated to the northeast of Mendip, north of Froome, that might have a different impact in terms of how many houses are expected up here, even though Mendip has lost its 5-year housing supply. So I think there's if those 505 houses go ahead, and the inspector says no, they must be in the northeast of the district, I think what Peter is saying is absolutely right. It may be, even if he decides that they don't all have to be in the northeast, that we end up with it, but it does take some of the impetus towards making both the sites happen. I think it really does ease off some of that. It changes something about the energy towards having both sites.
But surely we should be able to make our voices heard with the district council about whether or not we agree, where we're resident, and whether we agree with the proposal. Surely we should be able to get that across.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think what Peter is saying, though, is this, there's this national push for housing.
Which we all agree with. We all agree that there needs to be more houses. It's just about where they're sited.
Indeed.
And where the suitability of that site is.
But it is where the road has another 50 houses, which would be, 26 or something, or 24 and 26 or something, or they go somewhere else, or half of them. I mean, there is that issue as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think clearly, if I took a vote of the audience here, I know what the view would be. I would actually suggest, with respect to that opposition, the real purpose of tonight's meeting is to work on the assumption that there is going to be a planning application made, and is there anything you can say that could lessen what would be perhaps your view, the damage that will be done by that site? So we're shortly going to be told, and I haven't seen the scheme yet, an outline plan for the site. I think really it's an opportunity to try and influence that. So yes, there will be a separate opportunity when it comes before the parish council, which I assume will be either at the next meeting or the meeting after that, to say whether we approve or disapprove the site. But I think this is an opportunity to try and influence the plans for the site.
Well, we've got nothing to compare with, Peter, have we? So,
Linda.
I just wanted to say something. There's something really important to think about, and that is that in the event of Mendip not having a 5-year housing supply, they're not any different from a lot of other councils. There is a presumption in favour of development, which means at any time, any landowner or any developer looking around for land can come forward with developments. The difference about this one, and I know people don't want it, but the difference here now is that you've got a chance to try and influence what that development might look like, and that's a very important opportunity you've got, because otherwise you know in other areas you could get developments that come forward and they are big builders who just come in and put in what they want because it's what brings forward the most economic value to them, and they're not interested in what the community wants. They're interested in what's out there in the market and what's going to be sold to anybody who wants to come and live in this type of environment. So if you work on the basis that the presumption's in favour of development, whether you like it or not, and your real time to actually respond to a consultation is when you get the more detailed plans that you can look at, comment on. What they're doing in this case, which is unusual, I mean, I've been involved with planning a long time, is they're going to do some transport work. So Somerset County Council will be involved, their highways department. They will be talking about it, because this presumption in favour of development, everybody works to try and deliver a scheme that deals with lots of issues, and sometimes they deal with issues that you've already got. and that's all part of what they're trying to do. But I think if you just try and remember that you've got a chance here to influence the scheme that you get and make it as good as it can be, on the basis that because of this presumption of development, it will happen because of the lack of 5-year supply. So I know you say you don't want it there, but we may not have any choice to have it there.
But it sounds very much like it's a hold your nose and take your medicine.
No, it's not, because
That's very much what it
it
sounds
isn't,
like.
but these guys wouldn't be here now. They would not be
They're
here.
doing it for financial reward. It's not. They're not giving anything.
Well,
It's financial reward.
actually, any landowner is allowed to do what they will with the
I
land.
agree.
They can put something forward. You guys have got the chance to.
But we're allowed to say we don't want it.
Well, you can say you don't want it, but actually, the chances are.
Yeah, tough. Hold your nose and give them medicine.
No, when the consultation comes, yeah, I think. You know, I know it's a very difficult pill to swallow. I've been involved in it all the time. It's very difficult for anybody to accept. But if it's coming, then do what you can to influence what you get.
Have you seen the congestion there?
Well,
up and down the street,
the thing is,
schools dropping off.
the thing
Have
is,
seen
you
it?
might see some improvements.
Have you seen it?
Yes.
I can't see how you can get it.
But listen, you're talking about something, 26 houses, the trip generations are not significant. Now, highways will do that. These guys will have to do some studies. What you saw was surveying was not traffic trips. It was to do with surveying the land, I assume, for the road and the pavement improvements and stuff like that. There will be, they'll have to do trip generations, they'll have to work out the traffic flows, there'll be peak times, they'll have to work all that sort of stuff out. All that will come in a document that you will get a chance to see at the time they put the application in. So you'll see all that. And then that's the time to actually come back if you've got concerns and discuss them as part of that consultation process. This is a chance to influence through negotiation what you get. The planning application, which is outlined, will include the transport assessment, which is not normally the case, and you'll have a chance to see what's coming forward and then be able to make more, you'll have something to make comments on.
But Linda, they won't be able to do anything different down on that corner.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer, so leave it to the engineer.
I know, but where would they? They would not be able to change it.
Okay, let's move on and hear the next presentation from CMS.
Follow that.
Hi all, good evening. I'm going to be fairly short because obviously I'm from the architects, and as Will explained, it will be an outline application going in with just the highways included, and all other matters will be reserved for a subsequent planning application. So details of the design of the houses, what they look like, materials, the landscaping, it's all to be considered later. But what we will do, and what we will be preparing to go with the outline application, is an illustrative layout and information of what it could look like, just to help people envisage it, understand it, and really get a feel of what could be there in terms of the number of houses and the layout. So we'll be looking at all the survey information on the ecology, the bats, the drainage, the levels, obviously, all the stat services, highways, where we're talking with them in terms of the access, and come up with a site plan which will show how these houses, the 29 houses, could be arranged in the mix that is agreed with Mendip, with the affordable, and how the affordable will be spread around the site. So all that will be in with the outline for you to look at and help you understand the principle of the development and what's being proposed. But it's really, like I say, it's not really up for debate in the application for comment. That will come subsequently. So the actual detail, the size of the house, or where this house is looking, this direction, that direction, that's all later.
Do you mean 29 houses?
29, sorry, that's what I thought I said.
26, you just said.
Oh, 29, sorry, apologies. Yeah, so we'll show how they could be arranged on the site, looking at the views.
Do you mean 26 houses or 29 houses?
29, I think, is the current number, isn't it?
Whoa, that's
Yeah, the Mendip draft allocation is for a minimum of 26 houses. So we've we've obviously weighing up, this is an edge of village location, rural character. There's always a requirement as well on housing developers to make efficient use of land. So we've tried to strike an effective... Sorry?
No, I said, why don't you squeeze in 35?
Well, because we don't think that's appropriate.
Good. It's good to know where the limit is.
Okay. But yes, as Paul said, this is purely an outline application. The layout, we will take all these comments on board. We'll take comments on board through the outline planning process. There will then be what's called a reserved matters application, which is where the layout and the massing and the appearance is all considered. So there'll be a separate round of consultation.
You're rude, but you're not really going to listen, are you?
Well, that's why we're here tonight, to be honest.
No, it's a done deal.
It's a done deal.
It is by no means a done
We
deal.
can tell you about the traffic and the congestion and everything, and that we're going to lose trees and hedges and wildlife habitats.
It's all down to
You
money.
don't need to do a survey. We can tell you. We live it every day.
Well, that's why we've commissioned independent engineers.
There's no point in asking us.
Is
It's
an
all
entrance.
done. It's done.
It's your own driveway as an entrance to come into the building.
Okay, no, but I mean, we've employed professional independent consultants to prepare reports, and they will be scrutinised by Mendip and by Somerset Council as part of the planning process. That's all I can say. I mean, we know people, are upset at proposals. That's inevitably the case for most developments. It's just trying to strike that balance, and hopefully the benefits of the scheme will outweigh the perceived negatives.
So what I'd like to ask, we now determine potentially 29 properties. How many vehicle spots are there going to be in these 29 houses? Is each house having 2 allocated parking spaces? I appreciate we haven't seen the plans yet, but
sure.
what is the impact of the volume of vehicles that potentially will go onto this site?
Yeah, so this site will be completely self-sufficient, so we will be designing the schemes to the maximum Mendip parking standards.
So one house,
Three spaces, for the larger house, 3 spaces, plus visitor
that's quite
spaces.
an increased volume of cars. Have we looked at the access? The James family are very much vested in this project and care about the community. What has been looked at using Merfield entrance as access onto the site? If they care so much,
Yeah, I mean, we have...
a wonderful walkway down the inside of the trees. Probably would not say.
Yeah, I mean, we
Has
have...
it been looked at?
It has been, well, that hasn't been looked at because we have to work within the parameters of the draft allocation. The draft allocation and the work that CMS have done on that that has informed what Mendip are proposing to allocate for the site, and that shows indicative access from the Mead and potentially from Straight Lane, and that
But
is
if it's
for...
not been looked at, it's not been proposed, has it?
But that
You're
part...
saying that the only access is through the Mead. You're saying it's not been looked at, so it's not even been
Sorry,
suggested and discussed.
what hasn't been looked at?
Access in through Merfield Drive itself.
Well, Merfield, that is outside of the allocation.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we have to work within the constraints that Mendip have proposed in terms of what is allocated.
Does anybody inform proposed buyers for these properties, whether they're the elderly or young families, that they're going to really struggle to become attached to one of the local surgeries?
Well, we're a housing developer. There will be something called a Section 106 agreement, which essentially goes hand in hand with the planning consent, should we get planning consent, and that lists a range of contributions that the development might have to contribute towards. Other local authorities have what's called community infrastructure levy, which essentially is a levy against each square metre of new floor space. Mendip don't have that policy at the moment, but it would be negotiated with Mendip and their officers through the planning process, whether it's highways, whether it's doctors' surgeries, education, and it's highly likely that the development will have to contribute towards that.
I just want to clarify. So what I've really understood here is the likelihood is that we are going to have at least this development because we have to have contribute to the allotted amount of housing that's needed for the space. And what I think Linda is saying is if the development's going to happen, sounds like it potentially will, what we can do is influence what it will look like. And for me, the most important thing is access, so that we don't have construction traffic through the Mead. I think would be really, really important. Preferably that there isn't access through the Mead. So I don't know if that is at all possible.
Absolutely, and that is something that we're very keen to flesh out, as Linda said, at outline stage. It's not usual, but we know the one key issue with this site, I'm sure there are many, but the key issue that's been raised is access. The advice we've been given is that the mead is excuse me, more appropriate. That said, that will come out through the planning process. Our consultants will.
Nobody's asked us, have they, about what we thought. You are allegedly now. What you're doing is presenting something that is probably going to happen. We've got influence on what it's going to look like, but it's going to happen. We've not looked. To me, the village hasn't looked at the other sites that are available for development.
I mean, that's a process that Mendip undertakes as part of their land supply audit on a regular basis. They've screened other sites across the district and indeed probably in Road itself. But this has been selected as one of the preferred sites to accommodate, rightly or wrongly, the required additional numbers of houses.
Somebody agreed to put the access to Church Farm on probably the most dangerous stretch in the A360. Somebody thought that was a great idea. Just waste of things.
I'm not a highways engineer.
You were involved in that to start with.
We were, yeah.
Or the
exactly.
first child that gets killed at the school.
Can I please, Peter, can I come in? My name's Dave Jupp, I'm the other DJ, I live in Merfield Lodge. Born and bred, luckily enough. That doesn't make me any better than the other visitors or people that's moved here in 1998. Our predecessors on parish councils past have always fought for the village boundary, village envelope, not to go outside of it, from the 60s onwards, late 60s. I'm asking you, the James family, to withdraw this, stop this, to the south of the village, because if you get your way with that field and ruin that part of the village, the opposite side of the road can get done as well, and you'll be up and away. And in the future, unfortunately, the James has ruined the southwest of the village. Please think again. It's not all about pound notes at the end of the day. You want to leave something for road, leave the character as it is.
Yeah, leave a legacy.
Just to make something clear though about the idea of it just being about money and making a quick buck, the family really wouldn't have offered the idea of a school, moving the school there, or indeed a potential for a village surgery if it were really all about the money. So I think you should think about that before making those sort of assertions. As for the idea of access from Merfield, I'm not an expert on the studies at all, so you shouldn't take my word for this, but I would just imagine that English Heritage would have a thing or two to say about the idea of doing anything with the Merfield Drive.
Hold on a minute, sorry. There was a report in the June minutes of the last parish council meeting that David, your father, if there was objection from the parish council about a development, he would not proceed. Is that still the case, or is that paled into insignificance now?
I can't comment on future ideas. What I'm trying to tell you is that what we have at the moment is really an opportunity. There is a developer that we're working with who has the ability, and I set out.
Will he withdraw any application going forward if the parish council objected to it?
I can't. I'm afraid I don't know enough to say on a future development. All I do know is this, which is that at the moment we're able to influence the developer on a site, and as I understand it, that's quite a rare opportunity. So.
But the legacy your father could leave behind, and I'm really sorry that he's not very well at all, is something that the village could remember him fondly of, rather than have ill feeling and say that's the man that went and agreed to go and build all them houses on that bit of land. That once it's gone, there's butterflies, that's been there years.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful bit of land. And once it's been buried under concrete, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that other people will look at my dad's legacy to the village through other works and think of those things that he's done as well in a balanced view. So.
What, the trees falling over
Yeah.
people's houses?
Yes. You didn't sort them out.
I'm concerned with is the pollution levels at school, which is a number of yards away, rising. There are 10 young children and grandchildren that attend that school. And I've done years of school runs to Rose School, and the pollution has been so bad somewhere, and I've actually said to the two grandchildren, hold your breath and get in school as quick as you can.
going to be increased with all the lorries going to and fro. So what reassurance have we got about pollution levels?
I mean, you know, we understand there's a congestion problem at the junction. So yes, there will be additional traffic through the build. That's obviously unavoidable. We will speak to Somerset. So as part of the outline application, there will be conditions attached to that if we get a consent. One of which would highly likely be a construction management plan. So we can work with the village, we can work with highways and the parish council to understand how best to access the site. And something that the family have certainly mooted to us is the fact that we could have a temporary access for construction from Straight Lane. That said, we need to liaise with highways to understand how that could be done safely, with appropriate visibility, and hopefully without obviously ruining what is a beautiful hedgerow and boundary trees as well. So there's always trade-offs, whether it's highways or ecology, and it's just trying to strike the best balance that meets the needs of the community and obviously the wider site.
Barbie.
So I just want to come back on the, just to come back to those issue of the 505 houses and where road is. So I kind of looked up the presumption, and it's not a presumption in favour of development, it's a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and that is different. It doesn't mean that we are saved from developers or anything like that, and it is only if it gets to the thing of the inspector saying we don't need the 505 houses here. That does change the landscape. If he does say that, it changes the landscape a little in terms of road will undoubtedly need some houses, but it might not need both sides. I'm not, I haven't got a crystal ball, so I can't be said, but the presumption in favour of sustainable development means that proposed developments should be granted planning permission unless, and this is the important bit, their adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh their benefits. So there is a very, very small, tiny get-out clause in terms of it isn't just a carte blanche for development. It has to be sustainable development, and that needs to be looked at carefully. So I think that is important when we think about these things. It isn't necessarily rollover. I think if those 505 houses have to be built in the northeast, then, these houses will come here, both sides probably. But so I think there's something about waiting and seeing what is the outcome of those hearings, whether we will know the outcome of those hearings before the planning application goes in. But it's a very complex landscape at the moment in terms of planning. And I think we need to be careful, that we remember that word sustainable development, and that it is about benefits and weighing them against, the adverse impact.
What about the 52 houses we've got near completion now?
Well, yeah. No, I can't with you.
I said those aren't being sold.
It's just a village when you come off that
I
main
know,
road.
but why do we need more
It's like stepping back in time.
Sustainable means
That's the beauty of roads. Do you know what I mean? It is. It's just time stops when you come off that main road. It's just like you've stepped into a complete different world. And the bigger the village gets, you lose it. You will lose that quality that makes a village a village.
Yes, I think we would all agree with you. Nobody wants any development in this village. Unfortunately, the government has set plans. Yeah, and we can look at so many other villages around us. If you look at Norton St Philip, the development that's gone in Norton St and Beckington as well. We've I'm in.
I used to cycle my push bike down through the village and saw 2 cars. Look at it now.
Yeah, we have a house on High Street, so I see it every day.
And then you want another 20, 30 cars that could be parked, coming into the village as well.
And parking is a huge problem for this village, as we all know. I mean, one of the good things I heard is about the proposals is the amount of parking provision which is going to be provided. I mean, drawing this to a conclusion, because I think it's getting fairly late now, there is obviously in the audience opposition to any development, but also opposition to the 29 houses by the Mead.
You know, if that was made into a nursing home, you've got my support. I'd go and work there. That's employment for the road people.
Well, when something
I
akin...
do it for a living now. I look after the elderly.
Okay, but when a nursing home was, or something akin to a nursing home was proposed for Barbara's-Field, there was overwhelming opposition to it. So, just picking up on the issues that have been raised, clearly access and the location of the access is a major concern, very major concern, and the concern about the congestion at the corner of the Mead and High Street, the knock-on to the school, the
lorries that are going to ruin the lanes, yeah?
The potential impact on Straight Lane, which is, I agree with everyone here, is a wonderful piece of road.
You can't come straight off a straight lane, so that's the wrong way. Any park gates short for which are terribly narrow.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, in terms of Straight Lane, under a construction management plan, any damage that's done to the lane or anything would have to be put right. And just touching on what Barbie said, sustainable development, there's been lots of said about making money and everything. Actually, one of the 3 factors of sustainable development is economic factors. And the economic factors means, because I know this well from Norton St Philip, the houses generate work for people who are building them, and that's a big factor in terms of sustainable development. The other one is social. Social means providing houses for what the community wants, and what you're trying to do ticks the social
criteria.
And then there's the environmental. So long as the environmental part of it is protected, and most houses now are having to be built with green energy and efficient things. So actually sustainable development, that's what it means in the MPPF, and this is why it's very difficult to actually avoid having development when it's in the plan, because as long as it ticks those boxes, sustainable, economic, and economic is bringing work, because the builders are coming in, they're buying local materials or whatever, and the lane can be protected or put right afterwards. And I do know from a conversation I had when I asked Highways if they could give a view about the Mead versus Straight Lane, that just looking at it before they get any detailed information, the Straight Lane access either from the land onto Straight Lane or via Merfield is not an option because of the nature of Straight Lane.
But the takeaway from this meeting, which I'm sure the team will have noted overwhelmingly, is real concern about access to this site. There's concern about 29 houses, but if we're going to have 29 houses, then access is absolutely a crucial issue. I think the thing we shouldn't discount, because it was a very important part of the endless research we did for the neighbourhood plan, is that there is a lot of pressure in this village to find retirement or houses for elderly people, and quite clearly this scheme has been devised with that thought in mind. And also importantly, and it came out in the neighbourhood plan and it's been reflected here, the cascade system, whereby houses will be given and will be offered initially to local people, and that I would suggest is something that we should welcome.
Peter, how many times have we been told that by developers?
Well, but this is
time and time and time again.
Peter, I think you want to take, the parish council wants to take away, it's not concerns, it's opposition. Concerns and opposition are 2 different things.
I recognise that, Mike, and I think that's for another meeting. I think when this comes to the parish council will have to take a view, and it will have to listen to what residents in total throughout the village are saying.
And as Rachel's point, can we absolutely know when that's going to be so that we can?
Oh, undoubtedly.
Because
And
there seems to be a lot of things that have happened in the past where people weren't quite informed.
no, I give you a personal guarantee that I will tell you personally when it's coming up at the parish council, and it's Hugh. Whereas Hugh is, he will issue notices, and it will be there on the agenda when it's coming before the parish council. So that is a separate issue. Having heard about the development, and yes, there's opposition and there's a major concern about access, but on the other hand, it is a development which is very much done with the requirements of the village that were specified in the neighbourhood plan being taken into account, with the houses being offered initially to local people. Is there any other point that anybody wants to raise?
Yes.
Yes.
Would the elderly houses be for sale?
Yes.
That's one point.
I assume that.
Yes,
Sorry.
that's the intention, and yeah, we're certainly very happy to look at mechanisms. We talked about the cascade marketing approach. That's something that we will need to discuss with Mendip as to how that can be secured. It would typically be done through a legal agreement.
I wonder what the price would be. But also, you're saying that for the elderly there, it's the furthest part away from the village hall, the church, the post office, the bus stop, even the post box is a mile away. So it's not very suitable for elderly people in the first place.
Well, we've had to listen to the views of the parish council and certainly David and his family, and they think provision of housing for the elderly is quite important.
It's the furthest point away from anywhere.
So, okay. But we've heard the overwhelming. We've heard overwhelmingly that there is a need for housing for the elderly in the village. If that's not the case, then it doesn't have to be provided. But we thought that was something that the village dearly wanted, to be honest.
Yeah, we did a survey, a housing needs survey, and that was the primary requirement, was for people in the village who wanted to trade down from their current house to perhaps a somewhat more manageable house, but wanted to stay in the village, and that was a very major factor which came out in the neighbourhood plan, which of course was voted overwhelmingly for by the village. Sue?
How many houses are there? 29 houses, and you said 50% were normal housing. It's 20, but that's only 30% of 29, which isn't a huge number of houses. So it's not going to make a massive difference. The other thing is there going to be a guarantee that this will stop at 29 houses? Is there additional land that you can add to over the coming 10 years?
Certainly any outline application would set the maximum, and that is 29.
For now.
I've been very patient. Picking up on what this lady said earlier on, we've talked about housing as a development. We're going to submit plans, and you've expressed about affordable housing. There must be a figure on that affordable housing. Ashford Homes have not developed a plan without having some indication of how much these properties are going to be for affordable housing. And whilst we're saying housing, you're looking at people in the village downsizing. Why would they want to go from one house to another house? Have you not looked at suitable bungalows or low-level, one-level accommodation for people?
Yeah, as Paul explained, the layout is subject to a later application. However,
today to have a look at it, what you're proposing.
the layout isn't something really that we're seeking approval for. That's down the line. It's access that we're very much focused on at the moment. But we were certainly looking to provide bungalows as part of the provision of housing on the site. Absolutely. That's something the family are pushing very, very hard for as well.
Could I just ask a question? You know this cascade system, what happened with Church Farm, that cascade then went out to other villages, because there's lots of people who've stayed within the locality but couldn't afford maybe to live in Road and they live elsewhere. Would it cascade to surrounding villages before it went out to the wider district? Is that an opportunity?
Absolutely.
Because
And that,
young families moved on because they couldn't afford to live
yeah,
in the village.
no, absolutely. And that's something to say, we haven't got all the answers for that. It's something that we and the family are very keen to push. And it will be developed through consultation with Mendip as to how that could be secured. But typically, we see it being as, a similar manner that affordable housing is cascaded.
And when you talk about affordable housing, you're talking about, because that's very much dictated by Mendip, isn't it, in terms of value of the houses and
Yes.
the housing association and things like that. It's that type of affordable house, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, because affordable housing to some people means that we can all afford to buy it, but affordable housing normally means it goes to a housing association, and that's the number of those houses are dictated by policy.
And that would be in perpetuity as well, so it would remain affordable.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming this evening. I'm glad to see that Elaine, final and missing councillor, managed to make it as well. Thank you to Will and the team, and to Jan. This is obviously going to be debated at our next parish council meeting. We'll have to decide what way we hold that meeting. You know the parish councillors, you can make your views felt to the parish councillors. You know me, Mike Price now even knows me after today. So I'm sure that this isn't the end of the discussion, it's just a stage in the discussion, but I hope it's been a useful session this evening. And thank you again to Nigel Clark for making it possible.
And thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you.